Doctors of Reddit. What are the dead giveaway signs that someone is faking? I had a 360 testicular torsion and a doc thought I just had some inflamed glands due to my reactions. Luckily I came back after they sent me home, or I would have lost my ball. The inverse of this question. What can someone do if they are not faking it, but for whatever reason they have multiple doctors insist they're faking it? But by never telling the patient they're faking it, nothing is ever resolved, and it drags on for months and months. Obligatory not a doctor, but I got a call from my son's school nurse when he was in 2nd grade, and the conversation went like this. Nurse sounding upbeat and cheerful says, "Your son wants to tell you his terrible news." Son gets on the phone, says, "Hi mom, I cut my finger off." I ask him, "Where is your finger now?" "Son, I put it back on." I said, "Can I talk to the nurse?" Nurse gets on the phone again, says, "Sounds serious, right?" I asked, "Does he have a substitute teacher today?" Yes. I told the nurse to let him know I will take him to the hospital for a shot for his finger. To which he says, "I think it's okay." I glued it on really good. Nurse kept him in the office for a bit to talk about scary changes in the classroom. Did he make a full recovery? He has to reapply the glue occasionally, but otherwise he's fine now. I went to emergency once with intense chest pain. The young new doctor I saw first listened to my chest and immediately concluded I had pericarditis, but the supervising doctor decided I was faking it for drugs for some reason. The next morning I woke up to a psychologist in my room asking all sorts of random speep when an orderly interrupted because the ultrasound guy was in and wanted to see me first thing I think after talking to the first doc I saw. Turns out I had pericarditis and myocarditis and the dude wheeled me out himself and told them order an ambulance to take me to a hospital with a cardiac clinic. My sister is a pediatric audiologist and this is my favorite story of hers. Apparently, sometime in elementary school, usually the early grades, a ton of kids like to fake hearing loss. Like not just "oh, I can't hear the teacher." Full on, want to get hearing aids, etc. Anyway, she explained to me that, based on the way she plays the tones, you can usually tell if someone is faking. Especially when they just pretend they can't hear anything. But it's not 100%, obviously, because hearing loss patterns can be really weird. However, she's caught a number of kids simply by saying, "Okay, so I'm going to play a random number of tones and they'll go in both ears. I want you to say "yes" if you hear it, and "no" if you don't." My favorite thing about this thread is that half of the "here's how you know they're faking" comments get responses that are all, "yeah, about me, tell you how that assumption peeped me over, and I almost died." Happens all the time. I'm a nurse on a floor that deals with a lot of chronic and acute pain patients. Most recent instance was this lady from a few weeks ago that was apparently splitting the oxycodone we were giving her in half in her mouth, and then when the nurses' backs were turned, she would stuff it in a pill jar. A night nurse caught her in the act and all of her speep had to be searched. We found 20 half tablets of oxycodone she had been stashing. She told us that she was saving them for her family in case they need them, because it's just so hard to get an oxycodone prescription these days. I had her a few days after that, and she was having some abdominal pain. Stat X-ray showed only gas. She just really needed to fart. But she was screaming, claiming it was a 10, and making a huge peeping scene. She demanded Dilaudid through her fourth, and she wanted it to be pushed fast. Huge red flag right there. She wanted the high, not the relief. Doc straight up said he wouldn't give her Dilaudid because she was already on so many opiates. She then demanded lorazepam, still through her fourth of course. Doc was like, "Fine, whatever, just one time and only a low end dose." I was flushing her fourth with normal saline first to make sure her fourth was patent, and she leans back and is like, "Oh, that's so much better already." Hadn't even given her the lorazepam yet. SMDH. For real though, gas pain is no joke. I was once rushed to the hospital car as I knew I couldn't afford an ambulance, because I was doubled over in pain crying. I thought that something had ruptured or exploded. They weren't busy at all this night and got me back within 15 minutes of showing up. I don't like pills. Never have, because I know I had an addictive nature when it comes to substances, so I just avoid them altogether. So they do their test and scans and the doc comes in and tells me it's just severe gas buildup. I'm in tears still and ask the doc how the hell can gas cause this much pain and that it's gotta be something else. Doc says let me give you something, and if that doesn't work we can try something else. I'm like, okay cool, because no way gas hurts this much. 30 minutes later I'm in the bathroom like I just spent an hour at Taco Bell. The doc comes in to check on me when I finally manage a free moment. I can't help but look dumbfounded. Since they weren't busy at all, he sat down and explained that since I have IBS I need to be more careful with my intake or else this could happen again. All the while I felt like a complete dumbass because gas had me in tears. I thanked the document. He gave me some gas relief pills and suggested some diarrhea meds in case it happens again. I've never in my life been so sure it wasn't something only to be proven wrong. I'm in the middle of being treated like I'm faking, and it's really frustrating. I had a tool slip at work and hit me in the eye and forehead. Knocked me out for a second, and I lost sight in my eye. An hour later I started getting my sight back, but it hasn't fully come back. It's been months now. Two things I got diagnosed with were ocular migraines and vitreous detachment and a concussion. But none of those things explain why my vision is still blurry in my right eye. Except the VD, which causes floaters. But my issue is blurry vision. Like I have Vaseline in my eye. But doctors keep telling me I'm fine. That I need to go back to work. One doctor told me to think about the economy and that I was lucky to have a job right now, so I quit my job. I still want to see out of my right eye, but none of the doctors are taking me seriously. When I had a stroke 10 months ago, my biggest fear was I was somehow faking it and the ambulance ride was a sham. And why was I doing it? No, it turns out I was having a stroke. I was so worried I was being a faker, although I have never done that before. Just a really odd mental state. I don't know why anyone would want to fake anything medical. Unconsciousness in particular. I got a compound fracture recently and called 911 on myself and was put on hold. Fun stuff. But got through and asked them to send help. Operator was a badass and kept asking me questions to keep me conscious. The ambulance folks arrive. Casually got out of the ambulance, walk up to me, and then saw the bone sticking out of my body and said, quote, "Oh, you're actually hurt." Yes. Did you think I called 911 because I spilled some lemonade? Then it occurred to me that most of their calls must be horse beep. But to cause me even more confusion, I received close to a $2,000 bill for the privilege of actual help and the ride to the hospital. That ludicrous bill is no fault of the M's. I'm very much appreciative of their existence and they don't get nearly enough credit. But the best part of receiving that bill? The ambulance ride was roughly $18.50. The fentanyl they gave me was $2.15. Once my doctor accused me of faking to get out of school. I went in with serious stomach issues, and for some reason he decided to tickle me, which instinctually made me fidget and smile. To him that meant I was faking it, and he sent me away without checking my actual problem. I was grounded, and 15 years later, I still have those stomach issues. Fpeep you, Dr. Goody. I have the reverse. My back went out, extreme sciatica pain. Like being struck by lightning constantly. Couldn't move for days. When someone found me 3 days later they called 911. Just for the doctor to tell me I was faking it for pain meds. While I was crying in pain I asked him why I'd lay in a pile of my own piss and speep for 3 days for some Vicodin when I literally own a bar. Fpeeping insane. Edit. Thank each and every one of you for sharing your stories. As much as I hate hearing them, at least we aren't alone, and we know what each other are going through at some level. Actually, I feel much less alone in the world right now, because I've never met someone in my situation before. But they are obviously out there. If someone is truly unconscious, their thumb always wiggle. Just say that out loud to yourself. Moms, I always know when you're lying because your ears turn red when you lie. Kids, cover their ears when they lie. I told my daughter that she gets a red spot on her forehead when she lies. So she started using her hand to cover her forehead when she lied. It's like how you can make anyone blush by claiming that they're blushing. The more they deny it, the harder they'll blush. Whenever the symptoms aren't there, when the patient doesn't know they're being watched. I had someone fake a stroke recently and walked in on her walking around her room independently after pretending to be limp on her left side, letting us take complete care of her and wiping her butt for her. It was wild, y'all. Brief note for all the student doctors out there. People can pass stroke field tests and having a stroke. I could do everything on the list while I had a clot in my brain verified by court and MRI. Except I couldn't stop vomiting. Good times. Be aware sometimes PEEP doesn't look like you think it should. One time I was in hospital with decompression sickness and neurological damage and I couldn't piss. I told a nurse I needed a catheter, which she did right away, and I filled 3-liter bags straight off. Anyway, she commented that if a man actually says he needs a long tube pushed up the hole in his penis, then you can be sure he needs it done. Not a doctor but a paramedic. Tons of calls to the jail for inmates with seizures. I'll lift the arm over their face and let it go. They'll move it to prevent hitting their face, or I'll likely brush their eyelashes and they'll twitch to it. My wife is a doctor, and she had dealt with people faking things like one of their legs simply not working. The trick is to tell them to do some other thing with a positive phrasing, making it seem like doing so will prove the patient's story is true, while it proves the opposite. This works for both people who are actively faking it and people who have subconsciously convinced themselves the problem is real. For example, if they say their right leg can't move, you first ask them to try lifting it, which they try and obviously fail to move or flex any muscles in it. Then you act intrigued and say something like, now your left leg is the one that works fine, right? Go ahead and lift it up for me for comparison. While they are doing this, you still casually have your hand on their right leg, which you had placed there when you were feeling for any activity when they tried to lift it. Now when the person is laying there and lifts their left leg to prove their right one doesn't work, they will naturally flex their right leg to provide balance with their left leg in the air. If they are able to flex their right leg then, but won't even flex it when they claim to be trying to move it, then you know their leg still works. You just have to narrow down if they realize are faking it intentionally. I'm reading through this and hoping my doctor doesn't think I'm crazy. I've been recovering from long haul COVID, and it makes it seem like I want meds, but in reality, I just want answers. You can be faking good too. Had a tooth kicked out. Mouth filled with blood and swelling. I'd stuck a tissue in to try to stop the blood. I've presented to the tridge at the dental hospital. I'm dribbling blood as I talk. She asks me if it hurts, and I said a little bit. She looked at me dead in the eye and said one of the many things we tridge on is pain. Gotcha. Good nurse. Hurts like a moth earth peeper. I've literally been kicked in the face. Thanks for that. Notes taken. Was patched up and out of there within an hour. Edit. RIP inbox. Lol. And thanks for the awards. : Nurse here. I had a teenager overdose on Zoloft and start having strange seizure-like episodes. What made them particularly strange is that they all followed a predictable pattern of onset. First, he would lower the bed. Next he would turn the TV volume down. And finally he would check to see if I was nearby. There was pretty severe thrashing about without any abnormalities in breathing, heart rate, pupils, and he was still able to communicate with me throughout the entire episode. Unsurprisingly, EEG also failed to show any abnormalities. I just want to point out that there are many types of seizures, and there's a bit of a stigma surrounding people having them. Some people have focal aware seizures and will be able to respond and control their limbs during the episode. It's dangerous to assume that someone is faking just because they aren't experiencing a seizure like how you expect seizures to look. Not a doctor, but doctors often think my family is faking. For an unknown reason, when there's something wrong with our organs, our white blood cell count doesn't go up. My younger sister got appendicitis when she was in her early teens, crying from the pain, but blood work showed nothing was amiss. If it hadn't been for other tests and my dad's insistence on them, she might not have been treated in time. So they open her up and surprise, a gross appendix that was close to bursting. My dad insisted, because of an operation he had just had to remove his gallbladder. He was in so much pain that he was vomiting, could hardly walk. It had been building up for a while, and he was pretty sure what it was. He went to the doctor, but blood work showed his white count was normal. My dad had to scream in agony on their table for ages before they finally gave in and took him to surgery. They go in, see a perfectly healthy looking gallbladder. They pull it out, cut it open, and sand spills out. Dry sand. We learned later that it had completely stopped working and totally filled with protein chains. It was removed before it started killing my dad in earnest. So yes, people fake it. People lie. But do double check just in case. Still some time in officially becoming a doctor, but have been taught what to watch out for. Doctor expects symptoms from you, not signs. People who Google diseases often tell signs that they shouldn't be aware of. Refusing blood work. Exaggerating your condition. Description not matching their history. Around public holidays/long weekends, suspicion is always increased. I'm not a physician but a paramedic. Honestly, I don't really care if you're faking, as long as it's halfway believable. I'm still going to treat it as the worst case scenario. Faking a seizure? You'll get a full set of vitals, a blood sugar and a shot of benzos. There's lots of different types of seizures. If you call 911 because you're in extreme pain and want an ambulance ride, I'll put the good drugs in your vein hole. I'd rather give 100 drug seekers a 100 mcg of fentanyl than withhold it for the one person that really needs it. Can I tell if someone is faking? Yeah, most times, but it goes both ways. If you go too hard, I might assume you have a legit life-threatening injury and sedate, paralyze and intubate you. Or start fourths in your jugular or shin bone. Fake it if you want, but traction may vary. Honestly, my wife just needs to show up at emergency, and for some reason they always assume she is faking. A nurse tried to discharge her when she had an ectopic pregnancy, saying it was the stomach flu. 4 hours later she was in emergency surgery. She has hypothyroidism, but nearly all male doctors don't believe it's a real condition, so keep trying to take her off her meds or reducing them. Apparently this is somewhat of a common issue. She recently fell in the stairs and peeped her leg up. It took 4 R&D visits before they raid her leg despite the swelling and bruising. She was sent home from hospital when we first got together and had blood poisoning. Collapsed on the tube on the way home and straight in an ambulance for another 3-day stay in hospital. It's a nightmare to watch, as it's almost guaranteed at this point they will not take her seriously. As a patient, it's apparently very sus if you say you don't want an oxy script. I had some speep happen. Doc started filling one out for me, and I told him not to bother, since I wouldn't fill it. He got annoyed and said he wouldn't prescribe anything stronger. I got annoyed and said I didn't ask for anything stronger. 4 peeped reasons. Oxy/hydro/codeine don't work for me. Advil literally does more for me than any of those, so I'll just take ibuprofen. But apparently the way I phrase that makes doctors think that I'm asking for better meds instead of explaining that I'm just not going to bother with the worthless ones that they default to. Most often their story/description/exam doesn't make any sense. There are usually things that contradict each other. Abdominal pain is generally easy to tell when people are faking it. For example, I will press with my stethoscope instead of just listening. They don't respond to that pressure, but will when I use my hands instead. Sometimes I'll ask them if they are experiencing a symptom that will rule out a diagnosis or make it less likely, and many times they think I'm asking it to support their supposed issue, so they will say they have it. Most of the time people aren't faking, but just blow their symptoms out of proportion. Not a doctor, but as someone with health anxiety, sometimes I cannot tell if I'm actually experiencing pain/odd feelings, or if it's only in my head. If someone is unconscious, make a fist and rub your knuckles against their sternum chest bone. Put some pressure behind it, and rub quickly up and down, up towards chin, down towards belly button. It's called a sternal rub, and is incredibly painful, but won't harm the person. It's very hard to completely ignore and continue with the ruse of faking being unconscious. The only more sure thing is asking your partner to hand you the eye needle, to take some ocular fluid while they're passed out, so they won't feel the pain of the needle in their eye. There's no ocular needle, at least not on an ambulance. We say that because not everyone knows that, and they don't want to risk it. 2. RIP my inbox. Apparently the sternal rub isn't common practice anymore, because people literally went too hard. Sorry. Also I feel old AF now. My stepmom was passed out once and totally unresponsive, so we had to call an ambulance. I don't think she was faking, but when the EMT did a sternum press she literally came back to life like Frankenstein. She was like a egg. Then took a deep breath. It was honestly so crazy. I was 19, and have still never seen anything like it. Lol edit. Sternum rubber's name, I guess, my bad. I once had a patient with appendicitis. Every time I prodded him to check whether he actually had it or not, it would pain in different spots. Soon, it got to a point that, wherever I prodded him, he screamed like a stuck pig. I mean, that's a dead giveaway sign that someone's a faker. I was in a car accident while in the military. Upon impact, I gripped my steering wheel extra hard, hurting my wrist. They put me on light duty and regular checkups. I go to a civilian doctor first who explains everything to me. For example, I told him I could feel a strain in my forehead. He shows me a diagram with connective tissue in the forehead, and tells me that's from the whiplash. For my wrist he gives me a brace and a sling. I go to the military document. They take x-rays, and immediately she scolds me for faking my wrist injury. Nothing showed up in the x-rays. I pulled my wrist from the brace and rotated it, as a horrible grinding and crunching sound came from it. I knew I had cartilage damage, because I could feel the bones grinding together. I had to be the 19-year-old D3 to explain the military physician that soft tissue damage doesn't show up on x-rays.